right, let's testify, man. Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right, so I will testify of the power of God. Tell the word of the hope I have found. You, Lord. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has He done it for anyone else? I said, has He done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, He's always at work. Has He done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it up. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift Him high. Come on, testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing it. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
And good morning, everybody. Hope you are well, wherever you may be and whatever time zone you happen to be in. I want to start out with basically, I wouldn't say a retraction of what I said the other day, but more an amendment, if you will. So we talked for a bit on Friday about the incident involving Renee Good and the ICE agents. And so the to sum it up, pretty much, I said that people on both sides were overreacting to the extreme. People on the political left were acting as though Renee Good was a saint who was brutally murdered, gunned down in the streets by the evil dictator Donald Trump on his personal order and sanction to commit this terrible assassination. And people on the political right basically made it out that Renee Good was a horrifically evil, wantonly violent terrorist who was trying to mow down the ICE agents with her vehicle and was heroically stopped in what was clearly self defense. And I said then, and I do maintain that I don't think that either of these narratives is accurate. There has been some additional video footage that has come out since then, and a little bit more backstory on the events leading up to it. And so the reason that I wanted to start out by talking about it is because I was mistaken on a couple of the facts of the case. And so I want to make sure that I am as transparent as possible when it comes to something like this, because I don't want people to think that I'm turning a blind eye to things because of political ideology or something, even though, honestly, to side with someone who is as left leaning as Renee Good was is obviously not following my political beliefs. But at any rate, the so I said that it appeared, based on the footage that we saw that took place shortly before the incident took place. You could see her waving cars past her in her car shortly before the ICE officers approached. Now, there was no audio, so you couldn't really make out anything if anything was being said or anything like that. And but it was very apparent that from the looks of it, because of the snowy conditions, she may have been having trouble maneuvering her vehicle and was blocking traffic, and she was trying to wave people around her. And then the ICE agents rolled up on her and basically surrounded her vehicle. She panicked and tried to flee the scene, at which time the unfortunate shooting took place. So that is not entirely correct from now looking at it. So it does appear that from the additional information that was gathered, that she was in fact intentionally blocking the road. So she was purposely, basically trying to purposely trying to impede the ICE agents as they were attempting to pursue someone. I don't know who. And now let me make this clear: that is a crime, and it's a fairly serious crime. It is not, however, as Kristi Noem and President Trump said, domestic terrorism. And so domestic terrorism does have a very, very specific definition. And so I wanted to start out by actually going over that. So domestic terrorism is the use of violent criminal acts by individuals or groups in order to cause political change or to influence a population. So, just as terrorism in general is to use violence in order to achieve a political goal. Now, while her blocking traffic was definitely a crime, and it was in an attempt to impede a federal investigation, and she was a known protester of these various things. Number one, protesting is protected free speech, and definitely doesn't fall under terrorism. And simply blocking a police officer from doing their duty, while it is a crime, it's obstruction. It is not terrorism. Terrorism would be if, for example, the description that Trump and Noam offered, where she intentionally used her vehicle as a battering ram to try and take down the ICE agents, that would, in fact, qualify as domestic terrorism. However, I think that while you could, and I've said this the other day, and I maintain that I would not bring the ICE agent up on charges as far as his use of force. I know that many on the political left would find that a terrible statement, but the simple fact is that based on the circumstances, is it reasonable that the ICE agent believed that he was in direct physical danger? And I think the answer is yes. And so I think that is reasonable, and as such, I think that means that the shooting was would be a considered a legitimate shooting. That being said, labeling her as a terrorist for political gain, I think, is absolutely reprehensible. And so, and of course, Praying hears the door and is like, "What is that?" So, the so I think that unfortunately, calmer heads will not seem to prevail in this particular circumstance. But from all appearances, this woman was trying to basically, and this is something we see in political protests all the time, where people will try basically a form of passive resistance, where they will try to impede law enforcement through some kind of passive means. And when she became fearful for her life, she attempted to flee the scene, which is an additional crime. But I do not think, based on what we see, that she intentionally ran down the ICE agent. I think that was, and she didn't really run him down. She bumped him with the front quarter of her car, and he was almost immediately sidestepped that and avoided any kind of significant injury. If she had actually run him down, as President Trump described, he would have been spending much time in the hospital. Now, there are some questionable acts on both sides. Now, like I said, she shouldn't have been there. And as such, for people that want to say that she brought this upon herself, I would have to agree. As far as the shooting itself, had she not been impeding federal law enforcement, and had she not attempted to flee said federal law enforcement, she would still be alive. And that's unfortunate, but it's true. However, I am curious as to why the federal law enforcement chose the tactics that they did when attempting to they didn't attempt to de-escalate the situation. They basically escalated the situation. So you have someone who is passively resisting, and from what unfortunately, again, there's, do we have 100% of everything? No, but it seems that there was very little communication directly between the ICE officers and this woman. And the way that the ICE officers surrounded her vehicle and then told her to, and I can't remember, it was like, get the F out of the car or get out of the effing car or something like that. And I understand that to some people it's like, well, so what? They used harsh language, but it's you have to understand that if you're surrounded by a bunch of people in paramilitary gear who are yelling at you in the way that they are, most people do not have the calm, cool, collected personality necessary to maintain their composure in that circumstance and will tend to panic. And when people panic, the fight or flight instinct tends to kick in. It is not a matter of rational thought. It is a matter of basically you act on sheer emotionalism. And that's what happened. But I do want to also raise a question. This particular ICE agent that shot her, I'm not going to name him. I know a lot of people are. I'm not into doxing someone who is, even though I disagree with the practice that ICE does of hiding the faces of all their agents, I think that that's rather, well, dubious at best. So I'm not in favor of that, but I'm not interested in doxing anybody. But the ICE agent that actually shot her in Christy Noem's press conference, she mentioned the fact that a few months prior, I think it was last June or July, that he was involved in an incident in the same city where he was drugged by a moving vehicle. So, what are the odds that the only two incidents in a year's time that take place in this city involving a vehicle hitting an ICE agent happen to be the same guy? And and why is and by the way, track reviewer, no, this is not justifiable homicide. It's not homicide at all. Homicide is if to say justifiable homicide is not law enforcement discharging in the line of duty. That's not considered homicide. But anyway, but why is it that the one guy that was actually injured by a motor vehicle happens to be the guy standing directly in front of her vehicle when they're surrounding her and causing a heightened emotional circumstance? And as such, I think part of the reason that he did, in fact, open fire is because of the fact that he panicked as well because he thought, oh my God, it's happening again. He shouldn't have been there. And I'm not saying that he can't be an ICE agent, but I am saying that if you are a person who had been traumatically injured by a motor vehicle and you have a similar circumstance coming up, you should not be the one to approach that vehicle, much less be standing directly in front of it. If anything, he should have been way off to the side. So I think that's questionable at best. I think that the tactics used were inappropriate, but I think that I would not bring the actual agent on charges. I would, however, consider that ICE was at least partially responsible for this. And I maintain that I think that what Kristi Noem and President Trump said mere minutes after the shooting is, quite frankly, disgusting. She is not a domestic terrorist from all accounts. She is a liberal who was protesting. And while her protest might have been considered illegal, it was not violent and therefore would not be an act of terrorism. So That's my update on that. I still think overall it's a very unfortunate circumstance, and we have everybody seems to, and this is a byproduct, I think, that goes back to COVID-19, where everybody has basically become these self radicalized ideologues that if a circumstance like this happens, they can't just look at it for what it is, an unfortunate set of circumstances that led to the death of a woman. No, instead, it either has to be a government sanctioned murder or a heroic government agent saving the world from terrorists. That and that more than anything else is what's it's just terrifying to me in that and I know it's not terrifying like I'm not shaking in fear or anything, but I think that in the abstract sense I fear for the future of this country if we cannot look at something that is pretty cut and dry as to what happened and see it with any kind of rational head. Instead, everybody's got to take the extreme position one way or the other. And I hope that you're not doing that, you meaning anybody that happens to hear this. If you do think that it's one of the extreme positions that that she is a terrorist or that she was murdered, I would be interested in your opinion on that. Um, all right, so then other than that, just going to read the chat for a little while. I'm not going to be going too awful long because I do have things to do today. I'm way behind on the bills right now. Of course, that's nothing new for me. So let's get right to it. So Shwario was first in the chat. Thank you, my friend, and likes the song as usual. And says, unfortunately, I don't know what exactly happened with the Minneapolis situation. Well, look, as far as all the details, and this is just the thing, the investigation, and this is another thing that I can understand why some of the Democrats in Washington, D.C., as well as some of the leadership in the city and state, are justifiably upset, I think, is the fact that it would appear at least that the federal authorities are excluding the local authorities from any kind of investigation. So basically, we have the federal government, and only the federal government is being allowed to investigate. Now, I don't know if that's changed in the last 24 hours, but at least that was the case 24 hours ago. And that to me is also, we have checks and balances for a reason. We have, if there is a federal if a federal officer is involved in a shooting in a given city, that city should have the right to and actually has the duty to thoroughly investigate that shooting. But the fact that they're being left out of it and it's just being left up to the federal authorities, who the highest level of, the director of Homeland Security and the president of the United States both exonerated this guy before even a tenth of the evidence that's readily available to the public right now was out. And so, it's to me extremely disturbing to think that that is the manner in which we're going to allow investigations to go forth. Sharia says, I disagree about President Trump being an evil dictator. I didn't call President Trump an evil dictator, but whatever. It says, everybody seems to blame President Trump for things, I swear. The only thing I blame in this particular case, I mean, because there are plenty of things, I blame President Trump for what President Trump does. I don't blame him for, so for example, is President Trump directly responsible for this guy shooting Renee Good? No. He is, however, directly responsible for his immediate condemnation of Mrs. Good and his labeling her as a vicious, violent domestic terrorist. To me, is absolutely disgusting. I didn't call him an evil dictator, but I do think that he is a person without class when it comes to that. But from secondhand info, it seems that Good was just doing something stupid. She was. I mean, like I said, she was impeding, federal law officers, which is a crime, and she tried to flee said federal law officers, which is a crime. And so, and unfortunately, the particular officer that was directly in front of her vehicle was also the one who should not have been there by any stretch because of the fact that this person had already been hit by a vehicle. Let's see. Next thing you know, people are going to say President Trump is the flippant Antichrist. Well, and I've said it myself that I don't think that Trump is the Antichrist, capital A, but I do think he has the an Antichrist attitude, which is something entirely different that the Bible talks about, and that's people that basically profess attitudes that are antithetical to Christian value. And the most insidious thing about that is just that he also does this while claiming to be a Christian. Let's see, and then his opinions. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that's for. I think it was referred to. I think it is what is referred to as no. This is an officer involved shooting that I believe would not be considered excessive force. As far as the behavior of that particular officer. However, the tactics used, I think that there are some questions about, which could, like I said, I think have the Department of Homeland. If we were in a world where we didn't have a court system that seems to be more and more being influenced by politics, this would be a benchmark case for, or not a benchmark, but I'm trying to think of the right word, a textbook case for suing the Department of Homeland Security for liability. Because while I don't think they're completely liable, I would say that they are at least partially liable in this particular case. But that's armchair quarterbacking. I don't pretend to be a lawyer or anything. Josiah saying hello. How you doing? Let's see. We live in a mad world, very mad world. I would tend to agree. And then Josiah saying hello to everyone. Do you have a Stormtrooper's blaster? I do not. I only have the helmet. I might make one eventually. Did they riot? To the best of my knowledge, I don't know that there's been any riot. I assume you're talking about well, okay, so as far as the protesters that Good was a part of, I don't believe that there was any rioting going on. But even if, if the problem is that unless you can prove that she was personally involved in rioting, you can't just blanketly label her as a terrorist. Those words like that mean things. It's like calling someone a criminal if they haven't been convicted of a crime. That's not a fair thing to do. So if somebody wants to say, for example, the President of the United States is a criminal because he's been convicted of multiple felonies, that's an accurate statement. If they want to say that Joe Biden is a criminal because he's done things that he has not been convicted for, that is not a fair statement. You could say, I think that Joe Biden did illegal things. Just like I think that for example, the bombing of the supposed drug shipment from Venezuela, or multiple drug shipments from Venezuela, I think were crimes. But since nobody has been brought up on charges and likely never will be, I can't say that anybody is definitively a criminal for it. Looked like a huge crowd was gathering the other night. Oh, there's been multiple big protests around the country over this whole thing. And that's the thing, because keep in mind that this whole incident happened within blocks of where Mr. Floyd was killed. So, not a good circumstance. Gorilla saying, Kapal, what I missed? Not a whole lot, just me kind of trying to set the record straight as far as what happened with the ICE shooting. All this anti-Trump stuff has gotten out of hand, though. Where were they all when Obama did the exact same thing about mass deportations? He was also the one that had those I assume that's detainment places built. Here's the problem, Robert. You're highlighting the hypocrisy of both the ideological Democrats and Republicans. Because the way that it works on both sides of the political aisle, it is that if their guy is in charge, then then everything is defendable. So, for example, right now, if to someone who's an ideological Republican, no matter what Trump does, there's a good reason for it. No matter what Trump does, there's an explanation for it. No matter what Trump does, it's justified, right? Whereas, of course, if you're a liberal Democrat, then no matter what Trump does, it's bad. Now, flip the script, a couple of years ago when Biden was in office, then everything Biden did was horrible if you're a Republican and was good if you're a Democrat. Before that, Trump was in office, flip it back again. And before that, Obama was in office. Now, the difference with Obama is that here's the funny thing. You know why there wasn't a bunch of outrage when Obama was deporting people and building detention centers? Because the Republicans were in favor of it, to be honest. And so while they weren't up there cheering for him, because they will never cheer for someone of the opposition party, they're not going to condemn something that they, in fact, would support. And, so similarly, if let's say that Trump actually got an actual functioning universal health care program going, not going to happen, but let's just say he did. The Democrats would probably not cheer it on, although they should. Instead, they just won't loudly object. And so it's the same thing. So, and it's just, and keep in mind, the Republicans back in during the Obama years were so busy, unfortunately, riled up by Donald Trump, trying to convince the world that Obama was born in Kenya. And to them, that was more important than any of his actual policies. But, whatever. Track reviewer pointing out 4 days till Starfleet Academy. Yeah, well, at least that'll be better than the news, maybe. The ones that when Trump got elected, continues using. Yeah. Look, I'm not as far as so. Here's the funny thing about all that, right? So you're talking about the like the border detention facilities, particularly. So when you hear Democrats screaming and crying that Trump is separating families, right? and what a horrible thing that is. I would agree in part. I would agree that it is a horrible thing to take these families and separate them and all that, imprisoning children separate from their parents and all that, especially when we're not talking about violent crime or anything like that. I think is terrible. But it is also quite hypocritical for Democrats to be screaming about this as if Trump came up with the idea, because you're quite correct that this started during the Obama administration, and but you also can say that, well, Obama may have started it, but you know what? Trump didn't stop it during his first term. Biden didn't stop it during his term, and Trump didn't isn't seem to be inclined to. In fact, Trump is kind of escalating it now because Trump this time around has kind of run on the whole demonization of illegal immigration, which, I get it. That's a winner for him, but that's the problem is that I don't think Trump honestly gives a crap about immigration. I think that he just does it because he knows that it's a winner for him. That's my honest opinion, is that when it comes to the things that people think Trump is conservative about, I think they're just things that he doesn't care about. And so he'll throw the bones to the conservatives, because Trump is not a conservative. And that's the biggest the biggest confusion that I have over President Trump and the MAGA faithful is, and if you're one of them, Robert, I don't know, but if you're one of them, maybe you can explain this to me. Why do you think he's a conservative? Because yes, immigration, he's ridiculously tough on immigration, but he's and you could say, well, he overturned Roe v. Wade. Well, he didn't, but the Supreme Court did. That he helped stack. But the he takes credit for overturning Roe v. Wade. But neither of those is really a left-right issue, and the problem is that people don't even know. People have been so brainwashed by political ideology that they don't even know what their ideology is. They don't know what conservatism is anymore, and in fact, they don't know what liberalism is either. And so instead, we take a handful of these social issues, whether it be sexual preference or you know the abortion or illegal immigration, and we make that what being liberal or being conservative is all about. When that's just, those are for the most part social issues. Now, I'm not saying the issues aren't important, but they are not the end all be all of what conservatism is. And if you look at what is at Trump's core policies, the things that are really going to be impacting this country for a long period of time, Trump is a straight up liberal. And it makes perfect sense. He's a New York Democrat. He was a New York Democrat most of his life. And then he converted to becoming a Republican, surprise, surprise, just before he decided to run for president as a Republican. And I think, a lot of, and I do think that he does this on purpose. A lot of people, they'll critique Trump because of his incoherent speech pattern. But of course, if you listen to Trump talk for any length of time, and you can't objectively understand what I'm talking about there, then I don't know what to tell you. But Trump, generally speaking, has a very incoherent speech pattern. He goes off on random tangents constantly, and he almost never actually, like, I don't think I've ever heard Trump give a speech where I could follow what he was talking about for more than a couple of minutes. But the The interesting thing about that is I think that's kind of a ruse. I think that, especially because when you talk to people or you see like people like Bill Maher, very liberal and all that, and he goes and meets Trump and he says, "Wow, I was shocked when I met Trump. He was articulate and kind and warm and nice and all that. Not at all the bumbling buffoon that we see on TV." That his words, not mine. And so I think that it is a ruse. I think that Trump does this to throw people off, to make people underestimate him. And I think that he's far more clever than most people give him credit for. And in fact, I think he's far more clever than even those that think he's clever give him credit for. Because I think that he is, in fact, still just a New York liberal Democrat who's found a couple of issues that he can throw bones to the Republicans on in order to basically become president. And he does all this stuff that flies in the face of conservatism, and nobody even bats an eye because, hey, look at how great he is for immigration. Hey, he overturned Roe v. Wade. So I guess it doesn't matter that he's a tax and spend liberal. And if I'm wrong, please tell me how he's a conservative. There was a YouTube channel, there were AI videos where Jesus, someone like Michael Myers to Christianity. Okay, well, that sounds terrible. The problem is they told the feds to go F themselves. Walt says he is training and calling up the National Guard to fight the feds. That's not the problem, but that is definitely a problem. Now, I would say this as far as the mayor saying to ICE to go F themselves, I can understand why he said it, but I think that that was it was just as short-sighted and uncouth as what Trump and Kristi Noem did. The difference is that Trump and Kristi Noem, basically were acting like they were basically committing defamation against a dead person. And while I certainly understand why the mayor was telling ICE to get the F out of Dodge, I think that honestly, he's a politician. He's probably saying that because that's what a lot of his constituents want him to say. As far as Waltz saying he's going to call up the National Guard, that, in my opinion, is a big mistake. I do not want to see the National Guard forcibly evict federal agents from the state, because then what happens? Does that mean that Trump is going to send in the regular military and we end up with a miniature civil war on our hands? I certainly hope not. So I think that escalating this with the National Guard is a very bad idea. Trump's tweet was way overboard, I'll admit. It's not just overboard, it is reckless and defamation. If Trump was a civilian, if Trump was not president of the United States, he could absolutely be sued for defamation and would lose. I think the only reason he has the balls to say that kind of stuff now is because he won all that stuff granting himself immunity. John Rambo versus John Wick depends on how far apart they are and what weapons are involved. Because handguns, John Wick, hands down. Pretty much anything else, Rambo. Gorilla says they were stalking them all day. She was the ringleader of a segment of the Stop ICE movement. So first of all, calling her a ringleader, show me the evidence of that, because calling her a ringleader, where's the investigation on her? Where's the proof that she committed acts of violence against federal agents because as far as I know, I guarantee you, if there was footage of her committing acts of violence against federal agents, it would have been all over Twitter and Truth Social and all that by now, right? I'm sorry. I just repeating basically parts of what Trump and Kristi Noem said doesn't make it true. I don't think that she was the ringleader of anything. I think that she was a person who didn't like ICE. And maybe she was the one that got the idea of blocking the cars. That doesn't make you a ringleader unless you consider a ringleader in a gang of three people. And then Salty Dude John says, he is LOL. Okay. If you want to actually say something that I can comment on, sure, but I don't know for sure who he is and what he is. She also hit someone with a car, which is a crime. Now the interesting thing about that, and this is where, and I'll give here's where you get into some interesting nuance of the law, Trek Reviewer. Let's say that you have forget about the fact that it was ICE agents and she was a anti-ICE protester. Forget about that for a second. Let's just say that you're in a parking lot and a group of people surround your vehicle. And now, first of all, you may or may not be aware of this, but in many states, you are obligated to try to escape rather than confront people. But so if you look at her maneuver that she made, she backed up slightly, turning the wheel hard, and then pulled forward, looking like she was attempting to avoid hitting him. If she wanted to hit him, she would not have turned the wheel. And she certainly would not have backed up first. She just would have gunned it and plowed into him because he was literally right in front of her vehicle. And then she backed up, turned the wheel to turn away from him. And that's part of the reason that he wasn't injured, you know. So now, that means that if you're going to charge her with a crime, which, you know, you could say, okay, what is it, vehicular assault? No, because vehicular assault would be the intentional hitting someone with your vehicle. She is no more she is no more committing a crime than you commit if you misjudge a stop sign and bump into the bumper of the car in front of you. It was an accident. Now, she would have been liable for any injuries that he sustained. The crime that she committed was fleeing the scene. As far as, and of course, obstruction. So there are two crimes that she clearly committed. However, hitting him with the car was not in and of itself a crime unless you can show intent. And I think that when you look at the video footage, it is very clear that her intent was to avoid hitting him, and she misjudged. And then lowercase. No idea what you're talking about. The officer should have been on desk duty from when he got dragged to the car 6 months ago. I would say either desk duty or at the very, very least, like if they just were too short on having people in the field and they had to have him in the field, then he should have basically been, he should not have been standing literally in front of a vehicle that could potentially hit him. Okay, apologize about you called Trump an evil dictator. I guess I heard you wrong. Sorry. Yeah, I never called. I have definitely weighed my share of criticisms against President Trump, but calling him an evil dictator is not one of them because that I would need hard evidence for. Trump is definitely not a Christian. I would agree with you wholeheartedly on that. There's no such thing as justified homicide. Well, it depends on what state you're in. Different states have different statutory rules for what you call various things. As far as, because homicide is the intentional taking of a human life, generally speaking. However, homicide does specifically apply to civilians. If you are a law enforcement officer shooting someone in the line of duty, that is not homicide. If you are in the military and you shoot an enemy soldier, or an enemy combatant, you should say, that is not homicide, right? However, that's why you have specific types of charges that come up with those types of circumstances. So that's why you have things like excessive force. And that's why you can also be brought up on charges for violating someone's civil rights and stuff like that. Generally speaking, most of the time when a person, if because you would think, well, anytime someone kills somebody else, it's a violation of their civil rights, right? Well, 99.9% of the time, if one civilian shoots another, they're not going to bring them up on federal civil rights charges. However, if a civil servant does, then that's when civil rights charges tend to be weighed and tend to stick. So there are different crimes for when it is law enforcement. So justifiable homicide is basically when if let's say that you shoot somebody. For example, a perfect case of justifiable homicide is that you shot somebody in self-defense, right? That is justifiable homicide. It's still homicide because you intentionally killed another person. However, you are not guilty by reason of self-defense. It is therefore justifiable. Now, some states have an actual an actual trying to think of the right term, ruling you can make for justifiable homicide, while other states you simply say not guilty because of self-defense. It just depends on the state. She was trying to get away with disregard for anyone's safety. I would disagree with you on that, Gorilla. Sorry, it's getting a little chilly in here, so I turn the heater on. I would disagree with you. I don't think that she disregarded. If she had no regard for anyone's safety, then she again would not have backed up the vehicle, turned the wheel, and then pulled forward. If you and these are not in dispute, by the way. If you and no matter what angle you're looking at this from, and I know some angles it looks worse than it does from other angles, but if you actually pay attention to the sequence of events, when the ICE officer that's not the shooter but the one that was on the side of her vehicle tries to open her door, that's when she goes into flight mode. She puts it into reverse. She backs up just a couple of feet. And by the way, again, because she's taking into account the safety of these ICE officers, she could have backed up into the officer behind her. There was an ICE officer directly behind her vehicle, and she could have plowed into him. But she didn't. She just backed up a couple of feet so that she could then turn the wheel and crank it over and hopefully avoid hitting the ICE officer in front of her, but she did tap him. She didn't hit him hard, but she did tap him. But it does not, at least in my opinion, if I were her lawyer, assuming she were still alive, I would definitely fight hard for the fact that that it was unintentional, because because that changes everything. So if it's an unintentional contact, then while she would be liable for hitting him as far as any damages incurred, she would not be criminally liable. Stan says, been following events in Iran as well. People are asking why people would burn down one of their own mosques. No, I have not. Honestly, I've been driving most of the time. As far as man, my sinuses are going crazy today. As far as most of my time, I've been spending driving Uber. So I haven't like just sat down and watched the news. This particular story was hard to avoid, but I also actively looked for more information on this story because I wanted to make sure that I didn't misspeak on anything, and I did slightly, and that's why I opened this up by talking about it. And then Salty says, "Nope." Yeah, again, I don't know. Nope to what? You gotta. One word answers or one word comments aren't going to do anything. If they do charge and convict him, they need to do it outside of the cities because he won't get a fair trial. Sorry, that's not how it works, generally. You can file for a change of venue if you genuinely think that they couldn't get a fair trial, or you could just go for a bench trial. However, and in this particular case, if I were his attorney, I would go for a bench trial because judges tend to be, more dispassionate than juries, and you're not going to win this on emotion. You're going to win this on the law. Because I think that the law would favor that he did not do anything inappropriate, especially when you look at every angle. It particularly like the one where you see it from his personal perspective. Now there are some questionable things even there. And I don't know how much truth there is to this because I don't know what ICE's standards and practices are. But I do know that it is highly unusual for law enforcement officers of any kind to be pulling out their personal cell phones in order to record footage on a stop that they are on. That seems highly irregular. I do think that it's surprise. Well, it's not surprising, and yet it's still surprising that they're why don't they have body cams, right? Most police jurisdictions have body cams these days. I think ICE absolutely should because, especially since they're constantly being questioned about whether their activities are legitimate or not. The best way to show that their activities are legitimate is to be transparent. And I think that the reason that they're not wearing body cams is because body cam footage is something that is public record. And so they don't want what's going on there to be public record. Turns out Iran was forced to convert to Muslim by whoever was in charge. Wait, when are you talking about? Because Iran, as far as I know, has been Muslim for a very long time. Excuse me. So, I mean, if you had some non-Muslim protesters in Iran, shoot, there goes that. All right. If you had some non-Muslim protesters in Iran burn down a mosque, that's quite the bold move, considering that they are a theocracy. But as far as being forced to convert to Muslim, I mean, Iran has been a country dominated by Muslims for a very long time. Cartoon Network versus Nickelodeon. I'd probably go Cartoon Network. They were smashing windows of federal buildings in Murderopolis. Well, first of all, calling it Murderopolis kind of shoots your own argument in the foot. If you want to make, can you show that Renee Good was smashing windows of a federal building? And unless you can show that Renee Good was smashing windows, saying they are smashing windows, or are you talking about in the protests about her death? Because earlier I think you were trying to talk about whether she was a terrorist. But you know what? Because here's the problem: to say they are you talking about because it's kind of like when people talk about the January 6th insurrection. Was everybody that was marching on Washington, D.C. that day an insurrectionist? Of course not. Only the people that entered in through this, and even then, only the people that entered into the building by force. They were the insurrectionists. Even even though it's so funny because people think, oh, it's a spur of the moment thing, and yet they had a gallows there ready to for their demonstration. So don't tell me it was unplanned. But the as far as the people that broke into the Capitol and to try and deny that that happened, I mean, come on. Yes, there were people that peaceably entered the building on one side, and then there were people that broke into the building on the other side. So, as far as the people that broke into the building were absolutely insurrectionists. The people that came in peaceably were not. And the huge majority of people that would just happen to be in the area were not, right? So, when you say they are smashing windows, who are they? And that's the problem because, and this is again, we have this left, right bias that we have because we'll have people on the political right will tend to say that January 6th was not an insurrection. And then they'll try to say it was actually a peaceful protest. Clearly, at least a significant element of it was not a peaceful protest. But then they'll turn around and say that everybody involved in the Floyd demonstrations were a bunch of crazy domestic terrorists because some people that were involved in the protests did get violent. And I think that we need to, hey, what's fair is fair. If you're having a protest about any political issue, it doesn't matter what it is, and somebody in that group becomes violent, then it is the civil responsibility of everybody else involved in that movement to call out the person that did it. But guess what? On both sides, that doesn't happen. And we saw that on January 6th, and we see that in the protests that we see on the streets of various cities. Um, you know, that's just how it is. She was not protesting in that moment. She was trying to leave her house. That's what I thought, but I would dare say that's actually not true. There's some additional footage you can see that clearly demonstrates. First of all, you can see her rather snarky and I'm not saying she was violent, but her snarky and sarcastic comments from both her and her wife directed at the ICE agents. And there is a long distance shot, one of the more recent videos that came out, that shows that the cars were constantly, they were honking at her and stuff, trying to get her to move, and she refused. She was purposefully blocking that street. Now, I understand. So she's not 100% innocent, but I don't think that she was not being violent either. She was trying to passively resist, which is illegal. But that's the funny thing about that is that that's why people like Martin Luther King Jr. went to prison, and he didn't resist that. You know, and then he says he is, and then 34 convicted felon. Well, I already mentioned if you want to say he was a convicted felon or a criminal, you absolutely can say that. But that doesn't mean that you can say that, for example, that he is a criminal for anything he's done this term. You can simply say that these are things that should be investigated, or that you believe that he should be impeached or whatever. By the way, impeached is a trial. Well, it's because first the House indicts the president on impeachment, and then the Senate tries him. And of course, I think that Trump will be impeached a third time, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. No, she wasn't. She had been stalking them all day, raced ahead of them to block the street. So, again, stalking, I think that if you're saying she was protesting, yes. Stalking is a bit much. I think we should call it what it is. And as but and again, there's no proof, as far as I know, that she had done anything violent. Now, maybe by next week there'll be proof that she did something violent, in which case, fine. The domestic terrorist is a correct label, although it still doesn't excuse what is clearly factually false stated by the president, that she viciously, intentionally ran over the ICE officer. That's wrong on so many levels. And then Gorilla posts nothing. Joseph says she tried to run an ICE agent over and got perforated for her trouble. That was, of course, only after they antagonized him for several minutes. Um, I think that this is a patently false statement. But, and Joseph, you're entitled to your opinion. However, she did not try to run an ICE agent over. All the evidence would point to she tried to avoid running him over. So again, unfortunately, people refuse to simply see what happened, and instead they see what they want to have happened. I do agree, though. Trumpites will go to the mat for him on pretty much everything. Yeah, well, I would say the true MAGA heads will. But again, I would assume that you're a conservative but not a Trump supporter based on your earlier statement. But I would definitely say be careful about what you're saying, because she did not try to run over an ICE agent. There's no evidence of that. There was an AI YouTube channel. I don't care about AI YouTube channels where Jesus does anything. I really don't, Josiah. Let's see. Sing a song in your Ziggy the Clown voice. I don't have a Ziggy the Clown voice. Separating families, can't they all choose to go home together? No. I mean, you would think so, but no, because basically what happens is these people are collected on the border, and then when they are processed, they put children into a separate detention facility than they put their parents. And I've heard like debates in the House and Senate about this and stuff. Like, for example, a police officer will say, "Hey, you know what? If he shows up to arrest somebody at their home and their kids are there, then they're going to call Child Protective Services to take the kids while they arrest the parent." And that is true, but that is not the same thing as immigration. If the intent on illegal immigration is to send them back home, then there's no need to separate them. And that's a blight on Obama and Trump and Biden and Trump again. Having monarchy can be better than democracy. Well, then you should be all for Trump, I guess, since he likes to portray himself as a king. I'm not MAGA anymore. I'm a conservative. The ruling elites and many politicians aren't for the American people really anymore. They haven't been for some time. I think that for some MAGA, formerly MAGA people, they're just the thing is they were convinced because Trump has a blue collar esque mannerism about him. He cusses, he's bloviant, he is a bully, and people love that because they thought that, oh, finally one of us kind of thing. But they realize that he's just uh, he's a sheep in wolf's clothing. Just like the recent Jesse Ventura video where he called out both sides for their bull. If he ran for president, I'd vote for Jesse Ventura. I probably wouldn't vote for Jesse Ventura, but, he's right on that point. Though we know no independent presidential candidates don't stand a chance, unfortunately. But here's the problem with that, Robert. The reason that independent candidates don't stand a chance is because we all believe that independent candidates don't stand a chance. If we would stop being such chicken excrement people and vote third party, then a third party candidate could win. And by the way, that's why in the last couple of elections I voted third party. And I will probably continue to vote third party at least until the Republican Party becomes sane again. Trump talks that way, so it's hard to nail him down specific talking point. I think that's true as well. I think that, but I also think that it's to disarm people, make people think that he's dumber than he is. And like I said, I don't believe for a second that he's a conservative. You know, if you say A, well, I said A if B unless C, but only when D. That's definitely about right. Do you think Greenland and Venezuela are actual gambits for to limit China and Russian power, even at the cost of his political capital? Venezuelan oil under control, U.S. control, impacts Russia negatively. First of all, I think that Venezuela was, that's a whole other topic, Laura. I've talked about my opinions on Venezuela before. I think Venezuela was an illegal coup. And so but as far as Greenland, I don't, I think Trump, I want to say that, like, when you get into these big geopolitical questions, I want to say, "Oh, yeah, that's cool. It's this gambit about China and Russia and all." No, you know what? Trump just wants to stamp his name on everything. Trump, notice what has he done? What has he really done with any lasting mark so far in his second term? Well, because keep in mind, everything that he does by executive order not going to last because all it takes is a Democrat to get into office and on day one say all of Trump's executive orders are null and void, and that's a perfectly legit executive order to make. So all of his ruling by executive order, none of that is permanent and none of it is substantial. However, what has he done that's going to actually probably last a significant amount of time? Well, he's torn down a section of the White House and is building the Trump Ballroom. He has renamed the JFK Memorial Center for the Arts to the Trump and JFK Memorial Center for the Arts. And he has now staged a coup in Venezuela and wants to take Greenland, being the first president in a very long time to expand the borders of the United States if he's successful. And I would not be surprised if he comes up with some excuse as to why the current regime in Venezuela cannot be trusted, and so we just need to make them the 51st state, and we'll just call it Trump State. So I think Trump just wants to stick his name on everything, just like his stupid gaudy buildings. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. Billy Goat versus Ram. You should check your biology class. Am I still in time out for being truthful? I didn't put you in timeout. I don't know if somebody else did. And, as far as I know, you would never be put in timeout for being truthful. So maybe, instead of being snarky, you could say something substantial. Greenland as a U.S. protectorate limits Russian reach. I don't know that, because keep in mind, Greenland is not, because currently it's in the hands of Denmark, right? So if it's in the hands of Denmark, it's no more in Russia's reach than if it's in the hands of us, unless we suddenly massively militarize it. But you know what Greenland and Venezuela have in common? Oil. You know what else they have in common? They're big chunks of real estate that Trump can slap his name on. And even if Trump can't rename them to, Trump rename Greenland to, Trump land or something like that, even if he can't get away with that, he'll go down in the history books as the president that acquired Greenland. I think that's all he's after. I think he's just trying to immortalize himself. Alex says, hello, how you doing? Michael Myers versus Hannibal Lecter. Well, that's no contest. Michael Myers is a supernatural entity. Hannibal Lecter is just a really smart guy. Y'all want some more factual information about Trump, or I will get muted again for mentioning the facts. I don't know what you're talking about. Look, if you just, I'm not here to bash on Trump. But I mean, that seems to be what you guys want to talk about. But I just wanted to start this live stream by setting the record straight as far as the shooting incident. And now you guys just want to keep talking about Trump, I guess. So we'll talk about Trump for a little bit longer. You should be murdered in cold blood. You shouldn't be murdered in cold blood for disliking ICE. You're right. And you know what? She wasn't murdered in cold blood. And again, I'm tired of the hyperbole. She was not murdered in cold blood, nor was she a terrible domestic terrorist brought down by the guns of justice. I don't understand why people can't see that. If you can stop speaking with your emotions and actually use your brain for a half a minute, maybe you could see it. And then Gorilla puts in something about inside the ICE Watch movement of the activist life of Renee Nicole Good. Okay, so let me see if I can find that link in this chat so I can actually click on it. Is that it? Now, I don't know what this blog is, but no, I don't want notifications. Let's see. So where's their source? So roots in activism. So she was part of the Southside Family Charter School. Wow, terrible of her. Okay, and she let's see. Let's see. Very confrontation. And now, what's interesting here, so notice, this is from this very blog, and this blog comes off as extremely biased, but whatever. So it says she was part of something called Ice Watch. I'm still waiting for the source information on this, but which says that they use phone apps, whistles, and horns to alert neighborhoods when federal agents arrive. That was in one of the videos. Implements hazing tactics to prevent ICE raids from being completed. That doesn't even make sense as a statement unless they just are using the word hazing meaning something else than what I'm thinking of. And it says, while many tactics are nonviolent, federal reports have noted increasing instances of activists using vehicles to block or confront agents. So, first of all, notice this is a non sequitur, because notice it says while many tactics have been nonviolent, and then it lists nonviolent tactics as if these are violent, because blocking someone with your vehicle is not an act of violence. Confronting someone with your vehicle is not necessarily violent unless you're hitting them with your vehicle. And even then, in the city of Minneapolis, one other incident involving an ICE agent hitting a vehicle is recorded, and that was not her, but it was the same agent. So that's an escalation, 2 in a year. Okay, so okay. So the Redwood blog is on Twitter, Truth Social, and whatever Mewy.com is, and there are no sources cited. So none of this indicates that she was violent. And by the way, I like the way they put warrior. So she was. We used to have this term that we used a lot in political discussions: SJW, social justice warrior, and now they put the woman is described as a warrior in quotation marks for social justice. Yeah, that's something that people have said forever and a day, and that's not a violent term. A social justice warrior is not someone that goes out into armed combat. I'm sorry, Gorilla. This is a big pile of nothing sauce. Unless you got some sources here, which there aren't any except for their own Twitter and Truth Social, you know, this is just someone writing their opinion on something without any kind of facts to back it up. To me, this might as well be someone just posting it on a YouTube feed because there's nothing here. That was a typo. I don't know what you mean. Hey, to the track reviewer, let's see. To call what happened excessive force is an understatement. It wasn't excessive force. Perhaps you don't understand what excessive force is. Okay, so I'm going to try one last time to explain this to you, Salt. It's funny because your name is Salty. My name is Salty. But to accuse an officer of the law of excessive force, the general guideline is that they may use deadly force if they have a reasonable belief that they or others are in imminent danger of death or bodily harm. He was standing in front of her vehicle when it lurched forward. First, it lurched backward a couple of feet, and then it lurched forward. He may not have been aware of her turning the tire, but it lurched forward. At that point, it is absolutely reasonable to believe that he thought he was in imminent danger. And that's the funny thing. You guys are like, everybody is extreme. You can't see it for what it is. It's an unfortunate circumstance. But he technically didn't do anything wrong as far as shooting. I don't think he should have been there. And I think that's where the liability of ICE comes in, is that he had no business standing in front of a vehicle, considering he is the one and only person in that city that got hit by a vehicle in that agency. But whatever. And yes, she was scared. She panicked. And that's unfortunate. But you know what? If if you are, if you are being pulled over by a cop and you panic and you try to pull out and he's standing in front of the car, he's completely justified in shooting you. Why did the ICE thug call her an effing B and then flee the scene if he hadn't screwed up? He didn't flee the scene. She was fleeing the scene. He walked away from the vehicle probably to make sure that he was, this is another thing people don't understand is yes, there was some contact between him and the vehicle. How severe, people are going to argue for days. Like Trump thinks that he was within an inch of his life. Clearly, that's not true. Other people say he wasn't hit at all. Clearly, that's not true either. But there was contact between him and the vehicle. And just, and I understand most people don't have any kind of real law enforcement. And Laura, if you're still here, please back me up on some of this because I know you have some experience in this. Is that if you're involved as a law enforcement officer in any kind of incident where physical contact takes place, the first thing you need to do is get checked out. by the EMTs if they're present, or the local hospital if you need to, whatever needs to be done. Why? Because your adrenaline is flowing so hard that she could have broken 3 bones in his arm and 1 in his leg, and he wouldn't have even known it for an hour. So, and that's just how it works. And so, when at the end of the incident that we see, he's walking away from where her car is crashed. Now, as far as her calling her an effing B, look, I'm going to be honest. I know for a fact that probably every single person in this chat has called somebody something that bad or worse for situations much less harsh than almost getting run over by them. Right? I've heard people say that about their exes just because they're their exes. I've heard people say this about, people who are on a sports team because they missed a layup or something. People say that all the time. Now, I don't know this guy. I don't know what his normal mannerisms are. And so I don't know if saying that is a particularly harsh statement for him or not. In certain parts of the country, particularly in the Northeast, using the F word is just a casual way of saying hello. Heck, if you're so offended by him saying effing B, don't you ever go to Ireland. Just saying. Because they use the C word just to casually refer to women. And he did not flee the scene. At least not in anything that I've seen did he flee the scene. In fact, if he fled the scene, then ICE would have been trying to track him down. If he can't get a fair trial, then it needs to be thrown out. That's not how it works. You can petition the court for a change of venue or a bench trial. And the judge, and this is why we have judges, the judge can decide whether or not that's a legitimate concern. And this is why judges are not supposed to be partisan positions. And that's why it's one of the worst things that's happened to this country in the last few decades is how politicized we've made judges. And so notice that these days people say, well, this judge was appointed by, and they'll say whatever president appointed that person, as if because this judge was appointed by Clinton or Obama or Trump or Bush or whoever, that it shouldn't matter, because the judge's job is not to weigh what their political ideology is. The judge's job is to weigh the law. And if the judge agrees that and that your attorney can show that, hey, you're right, it's very unlikely that your client is going to get a fair trial, we'll apply for a change of venue too, and then that'll happen. That's one of the reasons that the infamous Rodney King trial took place in Simi Valley as opposed to Los Angeles, is because they applied for a change of venue, saying that the cops couldn't possibly get a fair trial because the videotape beating of Rodney King became such a hot button issue that it sparked huge riots in Los Angeles. And so anywhere in Los Angeles, anybody that lives there is going to remember those riots, even if they don't remember Rodney King. And so they moved the trial to Simi Valley, to which a lot of people that were predisposed to say that the cops were guilty until proven innocent were angry because they moved the trial to Simi Valley, saying, oh, sure, they move it to where, a bunch of rich white people live as opposed to where all the black people live, because they basically immediately make the correlation that it's a race thing. But in actuality, it was the same kind of thing. They applied for the change of venue because they felt like the cops couldn't have possibly gotten a fair trial. And that would be up to his lawyer, assuming he was brought on charges. But to be honest, I don't see any charges to bring up. I would be honestly very, very surprised if he is actually, because the funny thing is, notice And this is a problem, but I think I think that the Democrats are partially correct about this. Notice the feds have pretty much excluded local law enforcement from the investigation, which means that the only way he's going to be brought up on charges is if the feds say he will, and the feds are probably not going to charge him with anything. Why did the ICE domestic terrorist refuse to let medical respond to her dying? They refused to let a doctor on the scene to try to help. So I've heard about that. I have not seen. Somebody said that there's video footage of that. I haven't seen it personally, and so I don't know the facts of that particular thing. However, if true, that would be part of a separate case. And just to make it clear, she was dead before she hit that pole. There's nothing that any doctor could have done. Now, it's entirely possible because keep in mind that, that doctor was not the first person to see the person in the vehicle. I think one of the ICE agents actually saw inside the vehicle immediately upon its crash. And plus, the wife actually saw her. You can see in one of the videos her running to the vehicle to see what happened. She takes one look inside the vehicle and then turns around and runs away. And so, given the fact that she was shot 3 times in the head at point blank range, I think that it was probably no doubt as to her medical condition. So a doctor wasn't going to be able to do anything. Now, if that's the case, that's the case. But that's assuming that you can actually demonstrate that they were actively preventing medical response. I don't know. I've heard people say that. I have not seen it. And so, you got to, with something like this, you got to demonstrate it. You can't just say it. I've heard a lot of unsubstantiated claims from the bootlickers in the chat, just saying, yes, and you're one of them. I'm just saying. You referred to the ICE agents as domestic terrorists. You seem to you don't understand what excessive force is. Look, there are bootlickers on both sides of this, and you are one of them, clearly, because you seem to not have anything to you have not even commented on a single point that I've made responding to any of your comments, which tells me that either I'm so far behind that you just haven't had time, or you're not gonna because you don't want to deal with actual facts. Do you think Strange New World season 4 will be released as soon as season 1 of Academy is over? Puppet episode, LOL. I don't know. I haven't heard when Strange New World season 4 is coming out, so I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. The timing would be about right. Though, just like the officer involved in George Floyd's death was wrongfully convicted and sentenced because it happened in the blue state, though Trump wouldn't give him a pardon. Go figure, he is no conservative. Well, first of all, I'll disagree with you on that. As far as the George Floyd case, and I don't know exactly what he was charged with. I'm assuming excessive force. That and in the case of George Floyd, that was excessive force, and I mean it was textbook excessive force. The problem is people think excessive force means Mark Furman. They think it means like whipping out the batons and beating the crap out of somebody. That obviously is a form of excessive force, but but kneeling on someone's neck for the amount of time that it was, especially considering that while it's true that George Floyd was passively resisting the officers, which is resisting arrest, he was not combatively resisting. And if you watch the footage, that's clear. And so, and he was on the ground and cuffed. And so, yeah, to kneel on his neck like that, which did in fact cause his death, and you can argue about the fact that he had drugs in his system all day long. He would not be dead if the cop hadn't been kneeling on his neck. So the primary cause of death was a knee to the neck, and that's unfortunate. But in that case, I don't think that it was. I don't think that those were trumped up, no pun intended, charges. I called it Murderopolis because there's 500 murders a year. I called it that for 20 years. Maybe you have, but in a case, in a situation like this, I'm sorry, girl. I just got to call a spade a spade. It's incredibly insensitive for you to degrade the community right now when they're going through what they're going through. All right, so just I get that you you don't care apparently, but there are a lot of people that are hurting right now because of what happened. That officer should be pardoned and released from prison. I disagree with you wholeheartedly, but you know that's just a difference of opinion. ICE are the real domestic terrorists, not the murder victim. Again, you don't know what you're talking about, or maybe you do, and you're just being a spokesperson for the radical left. I don't know. People screaming about her death are smashing windows. The people screaming. So, all the people that are upset about her death are smashing windows. Because if that's the case, there's probably not a single unsmashed window in the city. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that there's no rioting going on. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I haven't seen it. But to suggest that it's, all the people that are upset about this are a bunch of rioters and all the people. And so, what are you going to say about the January 6th people? Apparently, Iran was a monarchy until 1979 with the Shah, and then it became an Islamic republic. Oh, okay. So you do know that the Shah was an American puppet, right? That's why that's why there was the Iranian Revolution. It was an anti-American thing. Anyone that didn't convert to Islam. Well, that's the problem with theocracies in general. It's one of the reasons I don't want a Christian theocracy any more than I want a Muslim theocracy, is because in a theocracy, those that disagree with the theology of preference tend to get hurt. January 6th was an undeniable violent insurrection to overthrow the results of a democratic election. Her last words was, "It's okay, dude. I'm not mad at you. How is that snarky?" I understand that if you simply take the actual literal word she says out of context and all that, it sounds like a perfectly. You've been watching the Young Turks, I assume, and the you're 100% right that those are the last, at least the last thing we hear her say on the footage from the cop's personal phone. We also see the confrontation with the wife, who makes jokes about how they change their license plate out every time they have a confrontation with ICE. So if you're going to take her, okay, dude, I'm not mad at you, then are you going to also say that she's a federal criminal for altering the vehicular identification of her vehicle every single time that they see an ICE agent? And you can tell that because keep in mind, she's been blocking traffic, and and when they were trying to basically get her to move, her response is, "It's okay, dude. I'm not mad at you." And when you look at her face and everything, to me, her face is dripping with sarcasm. And of course, her wife gets out of the vehicle on the other side specifically to record the ICE agents to prove that they're there, I guess. Here in South Carolina, we do have a stand your ground laws on the books, so protests like that wouldn't work here. We would be a lot of people would be a lot of people shot. Well, I'm not a big fan of stand your ground laws in the way that most of them are done, because stand your ground laws tend to be a excuse for homicide laws, and I don't like that. I think that anytime a person is severely injured or killed, that I don't think that there should be a law that just gives you carte blanche exception to that, which is why even in law enforcement you have to meet certain qualifiers for a legitimate shooting. Running into an ICE officer was violent. And again, we see people not bothering to care about the facts, or at least editing the facts to suit their narrative, because she was clearly trying to avoid hitting the ICE officer. And so she would be negligent for any injuries that he sustained, but that was not a criminal action. But again, Joseph, I'm not expecting any kind of critical thought from you or Salty Dude John, because apparently you guys just want to repeat your ideological bullet points. Trump is an okay. Come on, dude. Please don't use language like that. He was found civilly liable for sexual assault. That is true. You don't need to use that particular word. You know that YouTube frowns upon that word. If you use that word again, any of the moderators, if he does use that word again, please time him out, because I will not put up with that. But should also be noted the only reason he's not in jail right now for the 34 felonies because the bigoted conservative white men voted for him to be president. Look, again, I don't. First of all, Trump got black men in record numbers for a Republican. So I guess they're bigots too. And I think that honestly, while I'm not a fan of Trump, I don't think that everybody that voted for Trump is bigoted. I think that a lot of people, it's one of those things like if you are if you're a racist, you probably would have voted for Trump, but you probably would have voted for any Republican. Just like, hey, that why do you think all the ethnic minorities tend to flock to the Democratic Party? Which is ironic because really the ingrained long-term racism all originated on the Democratic Party side, but that's a whole other thing. But I don't think that the reason that Trump won the election was because a bunch of bigoted white men voted for him. I think that the reason that he won the election was because a bunch of people were hoodwinked into thinking that he was a genuine populist. And by the way, a lot of people still think that for some reason. Like in 1940, Iran used Western laws and tried to ban face coverings and separation of sexes. Well, I don't know what Iranian history was like in 1940. I'm not an expert on Iranian history. Sing a song in a clown voice. Not today. If you want to say she wasn't trying to run over the cop, I could believe that. However, it's clear she intentionally accelerated in him with the intention of harm. And then the claim she was just trying and then you don't continue it with your next comment, so I'll just stop there. All right, so if you want to say she wasn't trying to run over the cop, I could believe that. However, it's clear she intentionally accelerated in him with the intention of harm. So you just contradicted yourself, Joseph. Do you see that? You say, oh, well, if you want to say she wasn't trying to run over the cop, I could believe that, but she was trying to run over the cop. That's what you're saying right here. I don't even understand that. However, no, the evidence clearly shows she was trying to avoid hitting the cop. that any contact was accidental. And so, again, I'm not saying that it was. And this is the funny thing. The reason I'm confident in my position is because people on both sides are so adamant in ignoring what I'm saying. All people on the left insist on suggesting that the ICE agents are were basically just murdered her in cold blood, and all the people on the political right seem to think that she was intentionally trying to murder the ICE agent. Make up your mind. James Bond versus Jason Bourne, hand-to-hand combat. Jason Bourne, but come on, James Bond. He was using terms that YouTube doesn't like, and you said you didn't want that used in the chat. Okay, so well, I know as far as the R word in the earlier statement, sure. I think Trump was trying to escape economic collapse by expanding the country. Economy has been garbage for a long while. I don't blame Trump for it. It's the blame goes back many administrations. I Well, first of all, as far as the economy, it's both parties' fault. But the funny thing is that as far as the more recent economy, it's a combination of factors. COVID definitely was a major part of why the economy is struggling right now. However, Trump refuses to acknowledge this because COVID started under his watch. And meanwhile, the many of the Democrats like to point out how the economy was tanking in the last year of Trump's administration, the first time around, but that was again because of COVID. Now, flip that around, however, is that during Biden, Trump himself still, and Trump supporters still say how the economy was so terrible under Biden and how it's doing so much better now, when the actual metrics show that the economy, when Biden first took over, the economy was in a downward spiral, and during the Biden administration, the downward spiral stopped and started recovering. And in fact, in the last year, the recovery has slowed down somewhat. So you can make arguments that Biden was, in fact, better for the economy than Trump. Because by all appearances, Trump is slowing down the economic growth in this country. It says she started the network. Okay. Where is the source on this? This is just a person writing a blog that's their opinion with no sources listed, as far as what you put here. At least I didn't see any sources. I mean, there's one part that says federal reports say. Well, federal reports say means that there's a federal report, which means if you're any kind of halfway decent journalist, you're going to put a link to that federal report, which amazingly doesn't seem to exist. The Stop ICE movement has been ramming ICE agents' vehicles. Okay. And you have proof that she was doing this? I mean, that she was driving vehicles into ICE agents? Because, that would be a crime, for sure. But I don't know anything about this Stop ICE organization. And of course, all of a sudden, it's in this guy's blog post. But what you need to do, if you're going to show her as a terrorist, you need to show her doing terrorist actions. Who said give them bread and circuses? That was exactly it's been going on for a while now in America and other countries. Keep them distracted and divided. That would be Caesar, I believe. because the original term meant was for the Roman, and that's why the episode Bread and Circuses of the original series of Star Trek was about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire used entertainment in the form of gladiatorial games and free food to distract people from the real problems. And of course, these days, everything seems to be a distraction from Epstein. you know. She shouldn't have been there either. No, I agree. She should not have been there, and but neither should. But it's kind of funny. Both the victim and the shooter should not have been there. Let's see. Just like all this recent TPU and Erica Kirk pageantry has been going on. For example, I wouldn't give them people any money myself. No, the Erica Kirk thing. I refrain. I've been refraining from comment on Erica Kirk because trying to not beat up on the woman because she did lose her husband and everything. But man, I mean, every time she opens her mouth, I just. I saw this one thing where I think it was CBS or someone. Basically, they got the last person to talk to Charlie Kirk while he was still alive to be able to talk to her briefly, or at least, like, I think he recorded a question for her. And basically, he asked, since she has been asking people on the left to tone down their violent rhetoric, which is a talking point on the political right these days, is how violent the political left is. And the funny thing is, every time I hear people say, "Oh yeah, the political left is so violent," I mean, it's incredible. We're seeing all this violence. Like, just look at Charlie Kirk. And that's the funny. They have this one example that they always cite: Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk, and then they'll say when Trump was shot at, even though okay, the person that shot Trump was clearly a bit nuts, and and the person that shot Charlie Kirk was also a bit nuts. I don't think that either of these individuals are typical left wingers. And then you have, all the various incidents. Oh, and then they say, oh, but yeah, but look at all the left wing people that are celebrating what happened to Charlie Kirk. And you know what? The funny thing is, the most prominent voices I see on the left condemn those that actually celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk. And I haven't seen any prominent left politicians like actually celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. All that being said, when Nancy Pelosi, when her husband was beaten to a pulp, you had people, Republican politicians making jokes about it. And when Rob Reiner and his wife were brutally murdered, Donald Trump makes jokes about it. So, I'm sorry, violent rhetoric? I don't even know where to begin. But this guy was saying that, so she's been asking for the left to tone down their violent rhetoric. And so his question to her was, will you then ask Trump, will you condemn Trump's violent rhetoric that he keeps issuing at the left, since, he's the most influential person in the country? And she refused to answer. She refused to even address whether or not she thought that Trump's rhetoric was okay. She acted like a seasoned politician. And that's the weird thing about her, is that ever since Charlie Kirk died, she just kind of turned into a seasoned politician. And I don't, honestly, I look at her and I don't know what she's going through. I can't judge her in that respect. But man, every fiber of my being screams, this lady doesn't seem to give a crap about the fact that her husband was gunned down and is more interested in her political career. And I don't get it. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's what it appears. And Alex says, oh, yes, and I'm not proud of it. Not sure what you're talking about there. I call my boss worse than that on a daily basis. A lot of people do. That's why I'm saying the fact that the person said, "Oh," and you're I'm assuming because that was when I was saying the effing B thing. Yeah. So the fact that he referred to her as an effing B, a lot of people say, "Oh my god!" Like the Young Turks made a big deal out of it on their video about it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, can you believe that he said this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can believe that. He feels like he was just hit by her. All right, from his perspective, she tried to run him over. So yes, I absolutely can believe that he would say that. Now let's see. I had to leave the scene because he had to because he can't be a part of the investigation. That's true too. Yeah. So if young Michael could turn into a Wendigo, would he fight Dragon? That doesn't even make sense. Billy Goat versus Whitetail Buck. A goat versus a buck depends on the breed, I suppose. Well, whitetail. I mean, man, I would say probably, man, that's a tough one. Goats are not to be trifled with. They will mess you up. They got heads harder than concrete. So I'd probably actually go with the goat. Well, so might be turning into the Wendigo now. He was convicted of second-degree murder and manslaughter. I have no idea who he is in that statement. Oh, are you talking about the cop that killed Floyd? Well, there you go. Gotta go. All right, Alex, you have a good one. Of course, that was 20 minutes ago. Oops, missed that one. But that be his second offense. Gotcha. Now, apparently, I'm a bigoted white man, even though I'm Native American and Slavic with one German ancestor. Well, that makes you a bigoted white man. It's January now, of course. Will there be another government shutdown coming since this month is when the government spending bill is coming up? I don't know. I hope not. I think people are tired of that kind of crap. I personally think that government shutdowns should be illegal. But then again, Trump doesn't exactly have a stellar track record with following the law. What's so funny about Seuss's Among Us and Biggest Dickus? Whatever, dude. I don't know what you're talking about today. Well, there's your problem. You listen to the Young Turks. Actually, I don't listen to the Young Turks generally, but I try when there's a big thing like what's being, especially considering the fallout from this ICE shooting. I've gone out of my way to listen to liberal and conservative channels on it. And the funny thing is how unified both sides are. They have definitely got their talking points down, right? And the Young Turks is just a typical liberal mouthpiece, you know. And do I generally listen to them? No. Gorilla agrees with me on the goat. Hi, how's it going? Looks like I'm very late. That's okay. I'm about to wrap it up, but yeah, it's been an interesting conversation. People on both sides are. Everybody wants to be an extremist as far as the ICE shooting. Nobody wants to see the facts for what they are, which is sad to me. Thomas says, I asked a question on Nerd Fights. Do you believe the rumors of Star Wars horror series in development? Yeah, I brought that up on the screen, but I I've not heard these rumors. I hope not, because I don't think horror and Star Wars kind of go hand in hand. But then again, I didn't care for Andor, and a lot of people think Andor is brilliant. So maybe a horror series will be great for people that like Andor. Stop acting like you have a problem with me. I'm Josiah. Sometimes my only issue is that sometimes you have trouble reading the room. On a day where we're into this heavy conversation about the ICE situation is not the time for, a billy goat versus white-tailed deer kind of question. Don says I left before that. Ah, gotcha. I got censored by YouTube. I'm sorry. Or you got censored by YouTuber. Did somebody censor you? And if so, what for? I don't know. Maybe because you said I listen to Young Turks? I don't know. Just like a recent Turning Point event, Erica Kirk had Nicki Minaj on stage, talked to her, and even called her a sister in Christ. Nothing Christian about Nicki Minaj in her life or music. Yeah. To call Nicki Minaj, I mean, don't get me wrong. Look, I'll say this about Nicki Minaj. She is a beautiful woman. But yeah, would I call her a Christian? Not on your life. So, and not unless she suddenly starts coming out with rap albums that I can let a girl listen to and not cringe every 10 seconds. So I wouldn't support TPU in any form. You wouldn't support TPU in any form. I'm trying to think of oh, Turning Point. Turning Point. Yeah, I don't. And it's not because of her thing with Nicki Minaj. Because you know what? The reason she had Nicki Minaj on was because Nicki Minaj was saying nice things about Trump because, you know, Trump, again, being the opportunist that he is. Because Trump, keep in mind, Trump can do very little with domestic policy. But with foreign policy, presidents can do a lot. And so Nikki was upset about what was going on in Nigeria, and Trump said, okay, well, we can do something about that. And so all of a sudden, Nikki thinks Trump is great. Does that mean Nikki is a real conservative? Probably not. But hey, whatever. Well, don't act like we can't light fun in the chat. Well, that's fine, but if you're going to ask me a question like that during a conversation like this, that just derails the conversation. I'm sorry. So I make a joke about a deer and a goat involving a car. Well, maybe the system thought it was too graphic. I don't know. Deer just trap falls over and cries, and the goat hit at high speed just got up and flipped me off and walked away. Okay. Don't give money to any organization, even if I like them. I don't want emails and texts annoying me. I can kind of understand that. I remember one year I gave $5 to Jerry's Kids, and they started sending me so much junk mail for like the next decade. And it's like they had to have spent $50 in junk mail because I gave them $5 one year. So yeah, I get that. All right, and so with that, I am going to wrap it up, guys. It was definitely a potent conversation today, even if not a productive one. But I will just ask you guys one more time to try to set aside your biases for a minute. Look at the footage, but then imagine if the roles were reversed, and would you still feel the same way? Are you suggesting that either she's a, cold-blooded terrorist trying to run over cops because that's what you see in the video, or because that's what, you want to believe about her? Do you think that she was murdered in cold blood by a bunch of bloodthirsty thugs because that's what's in the video, or because that's what you want to believe? So, and I dare say that most people, right, if you hold either of those opinions, it's because it's what you want to believe. Because I don't think that the facts justify either extreme position. With that, take care, God bless, and hopefully this will be a much less eventful week.